Okay, so I have heard about, oh my god, y'all gotta excuse my hair, I want to look extra black today. But anyway, I've heard about this plantation. Ooh, gotta focus there. And everybody was like, you know, you should go visit, and I'm like, I don't know, like, why do they have a plantation in Durham? Like, I don't understand. But, you know, okay, can you see? But after, you know, researching it and, you know, just kind of hearing about it a little bit, I decided I was going to try it out. Y'all gotta excuse my shirt, I like it. Very vintage, which is very me. But we are here. It's called the Stagville or Stagville Plantation. What's up, guys? Gotta get some clarity here. Guess where I am? I'm at a plantation. I'm at a plantation, and today I'm going to be visiting and see what it's all about, because at first I really did not want to do a plantation. So I'm wondering if the tour changes my mind. We'll see. Thank you guys for tuning in.
He actually had 166 slaves. Benham at that time only had 44, so he had 4 times as many as Benham. But unlike Benham, Washington didn't like the idea of slavery, so much so that in his will he sets his slaves free upon the death of his wife Martha. But what happened is 2 years later, Martha set them free herself, and according to Abigail Adams, who was the first lady at the time, because Martha was afraid the slaves would find out about that will and realize that when Martha died, they became free, and they might want to hurry that up. Okay? So to protect yourself, she sets them free before they can do anything. It is interesting to note that George Washington was not the only founding father of our country who wrote.
Oh, wow. Are we allowed to take pictures in here?
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
Yeah, she asked if you're allowed to take pictures inside. You are. Okay, so you can take them in and out wherever you want.
My husband wants to get his glass.
Okay, so he'll be on that net. I'm going to leave the door jar of this.
Let me see the side pocket.
Okay, so we're going to start with the older part of the house through that door in just a minute, but before we go there and leave this room, I want to talk about it for a minute. Most of what I'm going to say this morning is about the history of marble, but they didn't like the expense of it, and this is the answer to that. Now, because there's a pretty good number of us here, we're not all going to fit in these. 2 rooms were 1 room originally, so when the small part of the house was the whole house, that was 1 room, and that was Mr. and Mrs. Benahan's bedroom. If you step into the office, you'll see that the floor in there doesn't.
I know, it's a little drop there, you feel it.
They use a lapis glass the way they can.
I'm not even sure what laughing plaster is.
It's a bush to sit on.
Man, where's the girl?
Okay, so the butler's pantry is not where the food was cooked. It was cooked in a separate kitchen that was outside the house. And that pile of stones that's just 30 yards out here behind us, that you can see through the window real clearly, that's where the kitchen was. That's what's left of it. It was a 2-story building. The cooks lived upstairs, did the cooking downstairs. Can you guess why wealthy people in North Carolina usually did have their kitchen outside the house?
Fire.
Well, a lot of people think that.
Too hot.
Okay, the main reason is heat. Because as we go through the house, you're going to see a fireplace that didn't have anything to enclose it or anything. It was a hazard anyway. But it did burn down, so we'll give you credit for that. Okay? So anyway, because you don't want the extra heat in the house, you have the cooking done outside. The food would be brought from the kitchen out there into the butler's pantry. It could be reheated here if necessary. Be made to
See back down.
So obviously this is a very modest house. And if you compare this to other rich people's house that were built about the same time, it really doesn't show off very well. However, if you compare it to the average person's house, it does show off well. Consider that most people's house could fit in this parlor, okay? Look at the woodwork around the walls. It's called wainscoting. Look at this big mantelpiece right here. Look at the details here in this fluting. And look at the molding up there. It's called dental molding because it looks like teeth. You and I look at that, we don't think a thing about it because you can go to Lowe's and buy a piece of machine tool for you, and you can nail it up on your wall and paint it and be done in a weekend project. But remember, there was no Lowe's, there were no power tools. All of this is hand carved. Okay? That costs a lot because the carpenters who can do that are going to charge you a lot of money. The fact that the wood is painted is another really expensive thing. You couldn't buy ready-made paint. You have to pay somebody to sit for hours and hours and hours squeezing berries to get the right pigment, mixing it carefully with flaxseed oil. That costs a lot of money. Finally, if you notice in the windows, there's real glass panes. They weren't made in America at that time. They came from England. So they're expensive because they're imported. If you notice, a lot of these paints have bubbles in them and waves and all. Those are original paints from 240 years ago. They've lasted all this time. It's pretty remarkable. Now this room has the other three pieces of furniture that belong to the family. One is the bookcase over here. And I chose my words very carefully. I said person of color because he had Africans in his background, but he also had white people and Native Americans. So Thomas Day, as a free colored person, did not have the same rights that white people had. He could own property, and he did own large chunks of land around Milton, North Carolina, where he lived. He was wealthy enough to pay property taxes like other rich people. However, he was not allowed to vote. So although he's paying money to the government for the care of the government, he doesn't get a chance to have any say in what they do with his money. He could get legally married, which slaves could not do. In 1830, he married a free woman of color from Virginia. Both states then, as a lot of southern states did, had laws that said that free people of color could not move into the state to settle, which meant that his wife couldn't come to North Carolina to live with him, and he couldn't go to Virginia to live with her. What happened was, instead of them leaving the South, idea, okay? First thing, it had been raising cotton for years, had never rotated the crops. Cotton draws all the nutrients out of the soil was worthless, okay? Second, he had been promised that there were quarters there that the slaves could move right into, settle down, and start working on that plantation. Well, the quarters were in such bad shape that the first job they had was to tear them down and build completely new quarters. It turned out that they had to end up draining swampland on the plantation in order to have any good soil. And you can imagine how hard draining the swamp is, okay? So, at the end of the war, Paul Cameron decided he didn't want to have anything to do with cotton anymore. And he sold that plantation in little pieces. And guess who bought it? Guess who he sold it to? The slaves who had basically made it into a profitable plantation. And to this day, in that section around Greensboro, Alabama, there's a place called Cameron Place, named after him, Paul Cameron, which consists mostly of farm plots that are still owned by descendants of those slaves. So it's kind of strange how history kind of turns things on their heads. Okay. Any questions before we move into the last room in the house? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Jay.
There are no questions then. The slave quarters that remain are about a half mile directly north of us. We are not going to walk through the woods to get there. We're going to get in our cars and ride about a mile and a quarter to get there. So I'm going to ask you to follow me, and then when we get there, we're going to pull up the drive, and there's a circle at the end. Just stay in the circle and circle behind me, okay? All right.
One other thing, first last name, Cameron. He used the
No, his last name was Bennett.
Bennett, and he used the farm.
Yeah.
This is where the kids stay.
For their feet and
That's right.
Like the kids would stay in here.
Okay, let's get to our
Can you
cars. I'm
cross over
driving
this
a
line?
silver Honda Civic, okay?
Gets to here. This is part 2 of the tour. So we about to learn something today about the history. So hope you guys enjoy today.
Because there were no windows, or sometimes there was just a hole cut in one side, there really wasn't enough ventilation to dry it out thoroughly. That caused mold and mildew. That dirt floor would keep food that you drop there. It's awful hard to clean a dirt floor, and that food would attract rats from outside. They could easily get in through the logs or under the logs. When they came in to eat the food they found on the floor, they didn't politely leave before they went to the bathroom. They did it right there in the cabin. That also added to the unhealthy aspect of more. Okay. The Hortons are taking over. Right?
Yeah, we're coming back. We're coming back.
If these cabins grabbed the brick and pulled it up out of the mold. Here's where someone's thumb went into the soft edge of the brick. And here's the fingerprint.
Wow.
And then you guys who are back at the end, if you come up close, I'll show you.
This is pretty big. Come on.
Go to the head.
Okay, we're doing pretty good here. Keep on coming.
Ziggy, come on. Come over here. Let everybody get in.
Yeah, we're gonna make it. We're gonna get everybody. Not too bad. All right, first thing I want to point out is there's a bed over in the corner. It's not a four-poster with rope-sprung mattress like the other one was we saw at the plantation house. It's a functional one. The mattress rests on slats. Throughout the South, it was typical for adult slaves to have beds. They didn't sleep on the floor. If there were grandparents living in this family, there would be another bed for them. Kids all slept on pallets like this on the floor over here beside me. They slept 2 kids on each pallet. In order to fit 2 kids on a small pallet like that, they slept head to foot. Okay? And as the family grew, they made more pallets to put down to accommodate more children. The original pallet was stuffed with corn shucks and leftover hay. You can imagine that that's not real soft and comfortable, and it's certainly not very warm either. And on a cold winter night, when you've got that airspace right below the floorboards, you can imagine that could be a pretty cold and hard bed. I'm going to close this shuttered window for a second here because I want to kind of briefly take you through a day in the life of a slave family. So let's imagine that we get up before the sun has come up, so it's still dark. We have our breakfast by candlelight, and the candle was made from animal fat, not beeswax like we see in our churches. That means it smells and it's smoky. After we finish breakfast, we go out to the field. When the sun comes up, we go to work. We work until around noon. We have a short break for lunch, which we carried out to the field with us. Then we go back to work until the sun goes down. For 6 days a week, we don't see this room by anything but candlelight. Okay? Now, when you're thinking about a sunrise to sunset day, what does that mean in June? The longest day in June is almost 14 and a half hours of daylight here. The shortest day in December is almost 10 hours of daylight. So you have a long day no matter how you look at it. You and I might think that in the winter months when the crops aren't growing, there probably isn't much to do. But remember, that's when you're getting fields ready for next spring's planting. You're cutting trees down. That you signed, you agree to work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, all year round, no week off at Christmas time, okay? And you agree to obey his agent. In other words, he's going to send somebody out who's going to tell you what to plant and where to plant it, okay? Who's going to take it to market and sell it and then come back and give you your share. You're not taking it to market and get the best price you can. He's doing all that, all right? And so basically, all you are is the labor force, just like you were when you were a slave. Okay? The money to buy their own mule, their own plow, their own seed. They weren't dependent on the landowner anymore. They were basically rented. And during the 90 years that the Hart family stayed there, they made some changes. They added a kitchen on the back. They added a porch on the front. The upstairs rooms they turned into bedrooms. The downstairs rooms they turned into a living room and dining room. And they lived there. They were living there in 1954 when Liggett Myers Tobacco Company bought this property. Okay? I think they were actually living into the 1960s. But the reason I picked 1954 is that's when something changed here on this plantation. Liggett Myers became the owner. Okay? And that's when something big happened in our country, because 1954 was when the Supreme Court told the South you have to integrate your schools. Brown versus Board of Education. Okay? Very famous case. And that's considered the beginning of the modern civil rights movement. So we're taking you here at Stagville from a site that it started just before the Declaration of Independence made us a country. And we're going all the way up to this building, which is still occupied when the modern civil rights movement began by ex-slaves and descendants of slaves. That's why I think this is a really important site. It's a very, very important historical site. So let me pause here for a second. Are any questions or comments? 2 months later, Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. By the time he got inaugurated 4 months later, all 7 Deep South states had seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America in rebellion over his election. By June of the following year, 4 more of the Upper South states, including North Carolina as the next to the last one, joined the Deep South. Hostilities began in April of 1861 when Confederate troops fired on the island fortress of Fort Sumter, Charleston Harbor. Over the next So looking lengthwise, you see the building is divided into 3 sections. The outside sections are where the animals were kept. If you look over behind me, you notice the wood here is kind of wavy looking at the top. That's where animals chewed on it. It's called cribbage. The aisle between the outside sections was where a man could walk down between the animals and put hay in the feed troughs. We still have feed troughs over in that section of the barn. And we have one of the original water troughs lining the outside walls over to the right of that big door that I'm facing. This area above me that I'm pointing to that's floored, that flooring originally extended all the way down to that upper wall and to the one behind me. So that upper floor was taken out pretty much when they restored the barn in the 1980s so that visitors could see all the way up to the roof and realize how large the building is. That floor above us is where they stored the hay that was fed to the animals. So wagon loads of hay would stop under this hole right here. They would lift the hay up to the storage floor. Mules don't like to back up, especially with the wagon behind them, so they built doors opposite the inn door so they could continue on out. In the center aisle above us, there were holes every few feet where they could drop hay down closer to the animals that it was going to be fed to. The floors that you see on the ends of the building, what I call the second floor, is where they stored equipment during the cold winter months when the ground was too cold to work. So that's where the plows and harnesses were kept during the coldest months. If you look at this timber right here, if I can get my pointer to work. Notice all these marks on it? Okay, these timbers were too big to go through the sawmills that produced the siding, so they had to be hand hewn. So those are the adze marks. This is a tree that's been hand shaped into a support timber. Now, beside this being the largest barn in the state when it was built, the other interesting thing about it is that some of the building techniques are actually shipbuilding techniques. One of those techniques has to do with a beam like this one above me that goes all the way out to those upper walls. Now, that's really 2 beams put end to end. And the way that you normally do that is you cut the ends of the beam off at an angle, you put them together in what's called a scarf joint. We still use that in carpentry today, scarf joint.
Hey guys, it was fun out here. I really enjoyed myself. Like, I learned so much. I didn't want to come at first because I'm like, why? Why restore, you know, a damn plantation, like destroy it? But I feel like I learned a lot. I brought my kids. Hold on, I'm trying to get the house and stuff. I brought the kids. I learned oh so much. Oh so much. Like, just seeing that everything out here was built by black hands and the greatness. The greatness. Alright guys, thank you for watching my video. Feel free, tune in, like it, subscribe, and come with me on more adventures throughout the summer. Cheers. I can't get my angles. Cannot get my angles together. Cannot. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Make sure you always watch where you're stepping, because there could be any kind of bugs in here. Pick your feet up when you step. Oh dang, you got on flip-flops.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
Right here.
It says this is the cemetery. I know. But see, but you're not gonna see dead people. You usually see headstones and stuff like that, but you probably won't see that because they didn't consider slaves as people. So a lot of slaves didn't even have headstones.
It's a tree.
I don't know.
It's a tree.
Maybe we can research it. It might be moss or something. I don't know. But when you got a lot of dead people underneath your feet, like right now we're walking over dead bones. I don't. It might be the slave owners.
Yeah, look, here you go, right here.
So this was probably the slave owners. I can't really read it right now. And then the slaves, they don't get headstone. Like, they don't get this fancy stuff. That's like old Dutch style candy.
What about
This is like
cotton candy?
gift shop. Put it in my bag.
What did you put in that? Oh, I think that is the
We're gonna get it.
beat the cat too. He loves it.
Aww.
And they beat them. And cotton candy. Candy. We had one of those before. At Grandma's house.
We'll get one before we leave.